Welcome to Backstage with Richard Ridge. I'm at the New School for my Screen Actors Guild Foundation BroadwayWorld Conversation Q&A series, which celebrates the vibrant theater community here in New York City and the union actors who aspire to have a career on both stage and screen. My guest today is one of the theater's most celebrated actors, working effortlessly between musicals, dramas, and comedies, and he's currently giving one of the finest performances of his career as the father in the critically acclaimed hit musical Fun Home. Please welcome Tony Award winner Michael Cerveris.
I wanna play airplane. I wanna play airplane. I wanna play airplane. I wanna put my arms out and fly like the Red Baron in a Southwest Camel. No, wait. Like Superman up in the sky till I can see all of Pennsylvania.
Caption. My dad and I were exactly alike.
I see everything.
Caption. My dad and I were nothing alike.
You are giving one of the finest performances of your career as Bruce Bechtel in the musical Fun Home. What has made this experience of working on Fun Home so special and unique for you, Michael?
Well, I think it's a lot of things. It begins with the piece itself, which, as extraordinary and groundbreaking as a lot of the things that I've been fortunate enough to be part of have been, there's something really special and unique about this piece. It's I think maybe because it originates in someone's actual life, and there's the responsibility of kind of being faithful to that and protective of that. There's something about the fact that it's the time period is a time period that I grew up in as well. So, and the fact that it's a memory play about family brings you, deeper into your own memories and history. And it's, it's 10 years. It's my 10th Broadway show. It's been 10 years since the Assassins year. And there's just something about the whole experience that just, I feel like everything that I learned is a part of what I'm doing now. Like I needed to spend all of the last 30 some years as a professional actor, learning and those even more years as a person are all what I needed to arrive at this particular moment to tell this story, to try to breathe life into this character, and then the fact that it's meaning so much to the people that come to see it. I think that is the just the extra ingredient that takes it from being a fantastic job to a really mission almost. It feels like sometimes. I really feel like I've always thought that acting is a service profession, and it's the origins of drama are in religious ceremonies in ancient Greece, and I've always sort of thought of the actor's job as that kind of vessel for the writer's message, and that's never been so clear and so vivid and real to me as doing this show, because I really feel the reaction that we get from the audience at the end of the night and the way people applaud and literally thank us as we walk off the stage for having served this experience to them and shared this experience with them. It really feels like we're doing something meaningful and profound, and so to get to do that as an actor, that's the highest privilege you could have, I think. So
you are so brilliant in your portrayal. Talk about the man that you play and what you love about playing him.
Well, Bruce Bechtel is Alison's father. Alison Bechtel is a celebrated cartoonist who wrote a book called Fun Home that is about her family growing up, and she came out, realized that she was lesbian in college, and came out to her family, only to find out that her father had been a closeted gay man for her whole life, and hoped that this was maybe going to be a way for them to connect on a level that they never had before. And sadly, he died tragically 4 months later, and she always kind of wondered whether those events were related somehow. And she wrote this book some 30 or 40 years later as an attempt to kind of figure these things out for herself. Her father was an incredibly creative person. He was a high school English teacher, much beloved high school English teacher in this small town, Beech Creek, Pennsylvania, in the middle of central Pennsylvania. He also was restored houses meticulously, especially the house that she grew up in, this Victorian home in Beech Creek. And then he inherited the mantle of taking care of the family business, which was a funeral parlor, which is the funeral home, fun home of the title, is what the family called it. And excuse me. So he's just from those facts alone, he's a fascinating, very diverse character. Adding to that his closeted sexuality and sort of emotional challenges that somewhat arose, I think, probably from the strain of trying to live a life that wasn't true to his real self, but also, I think probably were just a fact of his life to begin with. He was prone to rages and was their family was very sort of distant with each other, so he's a very closed-off person to himself and to his children. And yet there's, I think, a lot of evidence that there is and was love in the family. I mean, he had 3 children. They had a sort of ideal family from the outside, and he was very concerned at preserving that impression that it was an ideal family. So he's a fascinating character who made a number of tragic mistakes, who felt unable to live life as he truly knew himself to be, to the degree that he even did know himself. And I think that's another part of the tragedy, is that he never truly understood himself. And then made unfortunate choices with younger boys, that it's difficult when you start to talk about it, because you start to paint a picture of a sort of irredeemable kind of figure, or the kind of person that we like to just dismiss as, oh, he's a pedophile, or oh, he's a monster. And his transgressions weren't they're serious, but not reprehensible exactly. And I think my interest in trying to play him is something that I guess has kind of colored many of the characters that I've played, who on the surface, if you just give the facts, they seem like terrible people and villains and people you would not want to be around. And I find myself fascinated with characters that seem to be that, but that have some heart and some redeeming quality, or at least something that makes it more of a question for us than a simple dismissal. Like, oh, John Wilkes Booth, he just killed the president, so he's a bad guy. This is true. However, he had very clear reasons for doing what he did, misguided as they were, and his feelings at the time, admittedly, he took them farther than anybody else, but he was not alone in feeling the way he did at the time. And Sweeney Todd, he's essentially a very passionately loving father who just gets a little carried away. But One Perone, still much admired by much of the Argentine populace. So, but certainly not all. So, like, I think what's interesting to me about characters and Bruce is this is more true of Bruce than anybody else. I find it so difficult to believe that there's anybody who is absent all redeeming elements. There are people who do horrific things. I don't think it benefits us as people or as theater watchers to just have somebody that we can just dismiss and feel like has nothing to do with us and doesn't make us question our actions or our choices or our country or our society. I think understanding or trying to appreciate the most extreme opposite points of view to our own is a way to elevate ourselves as a society. It's too easy to just talk to people that you agree with all the time and just get that feedback all the time. So I like playing these characters and trying to make some argument for the humanity of people that you don't feel are human.
I guess I'm older, and it's harder when you're older to begin. Peeling plaster, sagging roof, two missing stairs, a buckled wall. I'm fired up to do this, but on my own, so much damage, broken windows, pipes are shit, crap veneer. It's hours later, Jesus, I'm still standing here.
And this is, I think, the most emotionally draining character you played, isn't it? Why? How do you do it and get through that?
Well, yes, it absolutely is, and it's not. I don't quite know. I do it one at a time, and I try not to freak myself out by thinking about doing it for a year. And at the Public, we were only supposed to do it for 5 or 6 weeks, and we ended up being there for like 3 or 4 months. And I was talking to Matthew Broderick last night about, because he hadn't intended to be doing his show as long. And there's something weird about, like, when you enter into something thinking it's just going to be this amount of time, and then you're lucky enough that it becomes successful and people want you to keep doing it, but you hadn't quite thought about doing it that long. That's harder in some ways than, I know I'm doing this for a year and I'll just figure out how to do it for a year as I go along. I am still trying to figure out how to shed the character at the end of the night and trust that it's going to be accessible at 8 o'clock tomorrow, which is not really a problem, because with material this good, if you just show up and do what is written for you, you're 90% there. But I think what makes it so particularly draining is I found a more intuitive way into this role than others that I've done, where I've sort of assembled more facts and details from outside and then kind of constructed within that. This, I really feel like, even though Bruce's life experience couldn't be more different from my own, and Allison's family life couldn't have been more different, there are parallels, and there are ways that I feel it's a really personal performance, from everybody on the stage, I think. And the investment is personal, and it's beyond, it's something beyond craft, although craft is essential for performing it over and over again. You have to just forgive yourself for the nights where you just think, oh, I just suck so much. Because you're never the best judge of that, because I guarantee there are those nights when you come off and you go, I was awesome. Right. And people come up to you and go, you're feeling a little off tonight. You're a little, like, great. But I guess so. It's partly that I just feel so personally invested in this story and this piece and the communal experience that it is with the audience, and then there's just the fact that Bruce, the character, just like Bruce the person, gets no release, gets no resolution. You know, we take him to the brink, perhaps, maybe, of beginning to at least understand that there is something that he has to understand about himself, and then it stops, you know, in just the kind of way that takes your breath away, which was true to the actual man's life. So, unlike Sweeney Todd, which is also very dark material, and John Wilkes Booth, and other characters where I've had to carry a lot of darkness around with me through the week, those shows, you sort of got a place to put it, and you got a place to vent. And, you know, Sweeney, you know, in some ways was paid therapy, and in other ways, you know, drove me into therapy. So, but Bruce never gets that moment. Bruce never, and so I walk off stage with all of that stuff, and I now actually, my dresser used to meet me after that, after I come off stage, and you know, kind of, as dressers do, they just meet you when you come off stage. And he said, after a while, he said, you know what, I'm going to meet you in the dressing room, and you take the time you need to get back, which is, you know, my dresser Jeffrey is a very seasoned, great dresser, and he recognized what I couldn't even say, which is, I just need to fall apart sometimes when I come off stage. And sometimes it's fine, other times I'm just a mess, and sometimes I'll just stand in the hallway or in the wing and listen to Beth and Emily and Sydney do that trio that, for the audience, gives them some resolution that Allison, you know, hopefully has. And sometimes I, just as the actor, need to hear that and to have that too. So sometimes it's that, sometimes it's just have little hand washing rituals to try to sort of just, like, you know, put it away. But some nights it just doesn't go away right away.
Made your Broadway debut in 1993 in the title role in The Who's Tommy. Everybody wanted to be in that show. How did you get the role and working with The Who?
Well, I guess I was lucky that I didn't realize everybody wanted to get that role. I was out in California at that time, and I was in the middle of doing a production of Richard II at the Mark Taper Forum, and I just got a call saying, this theater in La Jolla is doing a stage version of The Who's Rock Opera Tommy, and you know, I had the simultaneous thoughts, that sounds fantastic, and that sounds ridiculous. Like, how are you going to put that on stage? But I just went over on a lunch break from, you know, rehearsals of Shakespeare to audition, and I just brought my guitar, because I figured, well, I'm not going to, like, wait for a piano player to play a rock song for me for this audition. I'll just bring my guitar. And I did David Bowie's Young Americans, which was also my audition song for Fame, when that was what had brought me. That's for my hair more than for, and I understand. But you know, and I think that that already, I think, got Dez's attention, because he wanted, you know, he's comes from rock and roll himself, and so the fact that I had a genuine, long-standing relationship with rock and roll and acting was the combination that he was looking for. And you know, but in the beginning, I didn't know I don't think there even was talk about what role it was for. It was just like, just come and do this. So I did that. I came back and maybe read for a couple of things, and then there was the dreaded dance call. But thank God, Wayne's, which, you know, I mean, I'll play a tree if I don't have to do a dance call for it. But Wayne Salento, the choreographer, was so smart, and he just, the dance call was with, I'm sure for the real dancers there was a real dance call, but for most of us it was just a big call. So there was, people of all levels of skill and non-skill in my case. So you just sort of did what you could do, and you knew that everybody else was going to be better than you, but there was probably somebody you could find who was struggling as much as you were. And then, I waited for what seemed like forever while I suppose they went every place else to see all the other people that really wanted to be in it. And then I got a call that I was going to be doing it. And then there was the transfer to New York, and we all had to audition again for our roles. And almost every single person ended up making the switch. There were some people who were students at UCSD or USD who were members of the cast who were not going to continue because they were students still, and they added a few more people for New York. But for the most part, everybody continued. But my audition was just a disaster for Broadway. I had a cold right before that. My travel got all screwed up, and I ended up getting in at midnight and getting no rest the next day. And this is after months of waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then I went and I warmed up in Joe Church, the music director's apartment. Well, he has a bunch of cats, and I'm allergic to cats. So I get to the audition, and I've decided I'm just gonna leave no room for any doubt. I am gonna get this part. So I sang 3 songs before my audition, even accompanying myself on guitar, like a Psychedelic Furs song, Pretty in Pink, and Young Americans again, and something else. And then went to start to sing the Tommy stuff. Well, what little voice I had available to me was done by the end of my songs. I in the middle of Sensation, it just dried up and went away altogether. Like in the, I'm a sensation. Honestly, that bad. And it's a room of 30 people, all the producers, all the people that I knew who had, seen me a bunch of times, Pete and Des, and all of them willing me to, not bomb the way I was bombing. And they kept me around the city for another few days. I thought just out of sympathy, and I think they were thinking about calling me back, and then they realized I just wasn't going to get well that quickly. And in the end, Des and Pete took me out to dinner, and I thought this was my consolation, goodbye dinner. And
dinner with the Who.
Yeah, exactly. And we're sitting talking, and Pete starts talking about, I want you to come over to London, and I'll show you the places where the band started, where we've played our first shows, and I want you to meet some of the guys I grew up with and was hanging out when I was this kid, when I was Tommy, and I thought, this is a pretty great consolation prize. This is not sounding too bad, and it wasn't until Pete said, I think it's fantastic that we saw thousands of people for this part, and the person we're going to give it to gave the worst audition of the whole thing. That was the first time it dawned on me that I was actually going to be doing this.
What a great story. Yeah. That is great. You next appeared on Broadway as Thomas Andrews in the Maury Yeston and Peter Stone musical Titanic. What made that musical so special? Because I was at the reunion with you guys.
That was really a treat to get to see all those people again. And some of whom I've seen, over the years. Brian Darcy James and I are good friends, and Marty Moran, and lots of us have continued to see each other. But there were other people that I hadn't seen for years, and to get to sing it with this enormous orchestra and this huge chorus was just beautiful. And to revisit that music, that score is just gorgeous. For me, it was exciting because I had, I'd done Tommy and gone to Germany, and then was coming back. And I've always done this my whole career. It's I never intended to be a musical theater actor, and I still struggle with that idea of myself. I guess filling out my work forms, I'm going to have to accept at some point that is what I do. But so so I was after Tommy, I was like, right, I'm going back now to do straight drama, which is what I thought I was going to do in the first place. And of course, the first job that I got was this. And I don't like to repeat myself. I don't, I will tend to get to a certain peak in the career mountain range, and I'll look for another peak to go to instead of just continuing to climb up the same thing. But this was intriguing to me because it was a style of singing. It was more legit singing than it was more like what I was trained to do when I was studying voice in college, which I had really only pursued because I wanted to do classical Shakespeare and classical verse, and we didn't have a speech and voice training at Yale, so I studied music really just to train my voice for Shakespeare. Fortunately, I developed the skills to be able to sing, scores like Maury's, and to broaden my range in things like Tommy without hurting it, because I was trained well in the first place and trained classically. So what was also fascinating about Titanic was Tommy was pretty much the same on opening night as the script that we got that first day. Des and Pete had crafted it and figured out most of it well in advance. Titanic was that classic. If it hadn't been for the fact that people weren't taking things out of town so much anymore, and the fact that you had to dig a new basement to put the hydraulics for the set in, it would have been in New Haven or Seattle or Chicago or wherever. But instead, all of its birth pains happened in full view of all Broadway, and I had never been part of that old school. Like Maury Eston and Peter Stone were such craftsmen of the old school who were fearless at throwing. There were characters that disappeared almost completely. Characters that had been two-line characters suddenly became really important characters. Huge sections of the show were cut. We had 7 different endings for it, and you think a show about the Titanic, you pretty much know how it's going to end. But there are a lot of versions of it, and when we arrived at the final thing, which was like on the afternoon of the day that we were freezing it, we barely had time to learn it and then just do it that night for the audience. And the audience leapt to their feet at the end for the first time, because before that, they were often with us for like a lot of the show, but at the end, there were just a mixture of confused faces and somewhat optimistic, but really kind of baffled, especially when I came out as Robert Ballard in a jumpsuit in a flash forward to 1985 when the wreck was discovered. It's like, I don't blame people for being confused, but that was so exciting to be part of, really seeing a show kind of emerge out of this what seemed like a disaster at any time, appropriately enough, and then to end up at the Tonys and stuff was just crazy.
Well, you have had the privilege of working on several Stephen Sondheim musicals, starting with Assassins, playing John Wilkes Booth in the Broadway production, winning the Tony Award for Best Featured Actor in a Musical. What are your fondest memories of working with Sondheim and on that show and working with him for the first time?
The greatest acting class ever. You had these 9 amazing actors playing these different characters, and the way the show's constructed, it's like a bunch of vignettes, a bunch of different scenes. So it kind of felt like an acting class where you sit and you want 2 people get up and you do the scene, and then people talk about it afterwards. So each scene, people would get up and everybody would be like, "Oh man, that is great! I'm really gonna have to like up my game because that was great." Then the next scene would come up and they're like, "Oh man, that was really great! Now I'm really gonna have to." So it was the best kind of like competition, and everybody sort of delighting in bringing their their best game, and it was such a wacky collection of people. I mean, I loved watching, and I got to watch everybody because after your your shot at the president, your character stayed on stage, and because Booth is up first, I remember Joe Mantello taking me out to lunch beforehand and saying, "Look, I'm gonna ask something of you that might be a little rough, but I'm gonna need you to be on stage for the whole show." And what am I gonna say? No. But in the end, it was the greatest gift because I got to watch the whole show from a fantastic vantage point and watch these amazing actors every night. So I loved watching Dennis, but always terrified that he was going to go careening off the staircase because he seemed to have no regard for his well-being. And I remember Tech, Jules Fisher and Peggy Eisenhower did the lighting, and they're extraordinary lighting designers, but they're very meticulous, and it's like you'll stand there for hours, and then Jules will say, "Okay, Michael, lean on your left foot," and so you lean a little this way, and then he'll say, "Okay, now lean on your right," and you lean on your right, and he says, "Okay, that's how far you have to move." And it takes a while, but when you hit your marks, you look fantastic because of the way they lit you. So there's a lot of time standing around on stage, and Mario Cantone basically did stand up for hours at a time while we went through that, and that was great.
If you could sum up the best part of the experience of working on Fun Home, what has it been for you?
I guess it's the feeling of being part of a performing ensemble, doing material that was created and crafted so beautifully by really skilled people, but the most important thing, I think, is the passion and the heart and the desire to make people bigger when they leave the theater, and to be part of affecting people. Not just. It's beyond a piece of theater. It's beyond a piece of work. It feels like I'm getting to be an instrument for change, along with everybody else that I'm working with, and the fact that it takes everything that I have managed to learn and then asks me to learn some more, and that we share it so utterly and truly with the audience. And I love the bows at the end of the show because we bow as a company. There's no hierarchy, and it feels like the applause, because we're all standing, the audience and us, at the end, and there's that shared, I guess the single thing is the shared experience of it, which is true in the best of theater all the time, but there's something I've never experienced quite like this.
My final question is, what is the best bit of advice that you've been given, either personally or professionally or both, that you live by?
Don't judge yourself by the people around you. When people get out of, I say this to people graduating from school all the time, like, there will be that person in your class who will take off, and you will want to think, well, clearly there's something wrong with me because that didn't happen for me. Or, somebody else will struggle for years, and there is no way to do it. There's only your way through it. And every day just wanting to be better and know more and be able to do more than you were yesterday, the journey being more important than the destination, I've always really believed in. It's meant that I've had this meandering, wandering circuitous path to where I am. When I look back, it all makes sense, and it all leads, together. There's no way I could have tracked that, planned it out beforehand. I think it's just always been about trying to, to improve myself and be of more service to, the art form and the society.
I thank you for such a beautiful afternoon. It's been such an honor for me. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Cerveris, See Fun Home, Circle in the Square.